So thank you so much for your kind participation. And this International Summer School, as you know, it is being nurtured by Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming in collaboration with OK Mind, which is a social entrepreneurship to promote mental health awareness, and Government Art Commerce College, PG College. So today we are honored to have with us Dr. Sanjana Salma. Let me introduce her. Dr. Sharma did her PhD and MPhil from JNU, and she is nurturing as a sociology teacher at Amity School of Social Science. Dr. Sharma PhD thesis was changing notions of Indian beauty in the era of globalization. I think this is her MPhil thesis. PhD thesis was changing and continuity the notions of beauty in India, a sociological study. So she has developed a kind of new area of study in sociology, which is very unconventional, and she has also presented many papers in different national and international conferences, focusing on topics like notion of beauty, sexual relations, gender relations, marginalization, violence, so on and so forth. So today she will be talking about from the perspective of sociology of aging. You know, what are the basic understanding that we need to have so far as the understanding of old age issue is concerned. Today is also a very important day. Today is 5th June, and 5th June is World Elderly Abuse Awareness Day. In short, name is WEAAD. So this year, the theme is combating elder abuse. And in the very presentation of Dr. Vanchu and Dr. Anand, we understood like there is a serious problem of violence when it comes to the old age people. And this World Elderly Abuse Awareness actually was initiated by the United Nations institution. One is called International Network for Prevention of Elderly Abuse in 2006. And you know, United Nations also accepted this decade of 2021 to 2030 as a decade of healthy aging. So there are so many sensitizations around this particular issue, but we can see there are no such sensitization when it comes to understanding this issue. So in this summer school, we have understood this issue from multidimensional perspective, right from the beginning of the presentation by Dr. Anand. Then we have Dr. Anga Tendulkar, Nimisha Vandan, Dr. Amit Vanchu, Dr. Usaram, and then Lekha Chakravarti and Professor Gyan Gului, who also helped us to understand this problem from the economics analysis and development discourse, which was one of the very significant sessions for us. So now let us try to understand this problem with sociological perspective. So with this word, may I invite Dr. Salma to kindly present her presentation, and then after we will have question answer session.
Thank you.
Dr. Sharma, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Randhir, for the introduction. I hope the presentation is visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So, as we all know, this is part of the International Summer School that you're all a part of. So, my work today is on the sociological insight into the problems and challenges of old age in the world. Before we begin, there are a few questions that I would like the participants to ask of themselves, considering that they've been here from the 8th till today, which is the 15th. So the question that I will be dealing with also through my presentation are questions like, how does one define old age? What is that age, that number at which one becomes old, according to us, according to our understanding of this whole concept of old age? And is that age, is that number, is it fixed? Is it something which is same across all societies at all times, or does it vary? If it varies, what are the reasons for that variation? If it does not vary, then what is it that keeps it constant? Those are the kind of questions that are important to address. Then how do we as individuals view those who are old? For example, if we reflect on the last depiction that we saw of the aged on cinema, on celluloid, in films, in television, in web series, the kind of questions that come to the mind is, what are the kind of roles that these aged are playing? What are the kind of characters that are being portrayed using the aged? Are those elderly actors who are playing those roles, or are those young actors with prosthetics that are playing those roles? Who is performing that particular act? Going forward, what are the kind of what is the kind of casting that they are getting? Are they being cast as main characters in a love story, in a drama series, in a fantasy? Are we seeing them as central players, or are they on the periphery? How are older women portrayed? How are older men portrayed? Because all of these reflections that we see in cinema, in art, is something that can help us understand the problems of the aged. And the reason why I use this as a reference point is that a lot of my work deals with representation. A lot of my work deals with the way in which the media portrays certain things. It is often said that art mimics life, but life also comes to mimic art. What we see repeatedly around ourselves 24 by 7 comes to determine how we behave with others. That is the reason why we see a normalization of violence. That is the reason why we see a normalization of ageism. And there are a lot of aspects to this which are important. So all through my work, we'll be going back to these essential questions, and I would want the participants to try to reflect on all of this. Could be any depiction that you saw recently, could be anything that could give you a reference point outside of the book, because what we see stays with us much longer. Now, to begin with, the question that comes at the beginning of everything is, what age is old age? So there are various accounts for this. The World Health Organization is one that says that most developed world countries characterize old age starting at 60 years and above. But this particular definition is not completely adaptable to a country like Africa, where the more traditional definition of an elderly or an elder person starts between 50 to 65 years of age. So it varies. It is not something that is fixed then. It varies according to the country, according to the culture, according to the time and space. In continuation, as per the United Nations, the reference of which was just given by Dr. Randhir, a person who is above 60 years of age is identified as an older person. So traditionally, what we believe is that old age marked the final stage in the human life cycle. If we go back to traditional Hindu conceptualizations of the age categories also, this was the period of renunciation. Right? So it was the final stage in the human life cycle. You were old when you were approaching the end of your life. That is why there were all of these importance was given to the aspect of renouncing the worldly pleasures, moving on to the spiritual path. The problem with that kind of old age definition, which continues to haunt us, is that no one really knows for certain when they are going to die. So, how do we know that one is approaching the end of one's life? It is something that continues to be precarious. Life itself is precarious. The WEF, which is the World Economic Forum, defines old age through a new measure, where they look at it from a prospective age category, which looks at the average number of years that people have left to live. So according to them, being old does not start at the age of 65. It starts when people have an average of 15 more years left to live. So if I am 35, I am not yet old because I have more than 15 years left to live. If somebody is 75, they are old because they have only 15 more years to live. But my problem with this persists. No one knows for certain when they are going to die. So how do we know? Life expectancy depends on a number of things. So how do we know that what is life expectancy at one particular time and space will be life expectancy at another time and space, right? Now, in continuation, when we try to look at this question of when is a person really old, there are multiple efforts that are made to define the aged, the elderly, or the old, but no one can really claim a patent over a definition. The aspect of aged essentially implies the state of being elderly, and there is no way in which it can be properly defined. Whether a person is perceived to be an elderly or not depends on the observer's eyes. There is no clear-cut demarcation of age upon the attainment of which a person can be labeled as old or elderly or aged. Neither is there a biologically determined age limit which classifies a person as elderly. This is the way I look at old age. In the Indian context, there's a lot of work that has been done. For example, Guha Roy says the definition of old age depends on the particular context in which it is used. A particular way of fixing one's entry into old age is based on this concept of retirement. But when we talk about retirement as that particular rite of passage through which you pass into old age, it ignores the women who have not been in gainful occupation. It ignores the unorganized sector where there is no retirement from. And also, the whole aspect of retirement is something which varies. In the governmental enterprises, retirement age is different. Even then, you can get extensions. In private enterprises, retirement age is different. Even then, you can get extensions. So how do we really fix the age of retirement as well? Other scholars like Gokhale, who worked on the concept of sociology of aging within the Indian context, say that statistically, it is 60 is a convenient age. So for statistical usages, for purposes of policy making, for purposes of planning, for purposes of law, the usage of the age 60 is something that serves a purpose. But old age actually is a relative concept. The whole process of the continuing physiological, psychological, social change that goes on throughout the lifespan is something which is variable and something that is occurring in the context of individuals. It is not something that we can make sweeping statements about, right? But the point is that yes, for policy making, we do realize that we need a statistical tool. So we talk about 60 as being the age at which we mark the old age as starting. A survey of studies that were conducted by scholars in India highlights how difficult it is to draw one particular line to categorize the elderly. And there is a wide variation in this. So it starts from 39, goes on till 51 years and above. So according to one group of scholars like Jatana and all, it is 51 years. Prakash puts it as 50 for years, 50 years for women and 60 years for men. Sen uses 39 as the dividing line, saying that those above 40 are old. For Iswamurthy, it varies between 58 and 70, while Barai and Patil, they treat 60 as the year because that is essentially also the age that is used by the census in the Indian context as the cutoff point to classify people as old. So those under 60 are not classified as old age, part of the old age population, but those who are 60 and above are classified as part of the old age population. Now, this brings me to the other question, which is about longevity. World over, we can see it all around us. People are living much longer than they used to. In the United States for America, when Social Security started in 1935, the average life expectancy was 61 years. This is where we now say old age begins. But this was when life was ending back in 1935. At present, in the United States, it's closer to 79 years. In the Indian context, at present, as per the data of 2020 by the WHO, the average life expectancy in the Indian context is 70.8 years. For women, it is 72.2 years. For men, it is 69.5 years. Now, if we go back in time, we go back another 50 plus years, we see that in 1970, the average Indian lived only up to 47 years. So the life expectancy is increasing. Right? It is not wrong to say that it is increased many-fold. Right? So it is not something that's happening only in the context of India or in the context of the United States. It's a phenomena the world over. So this is just an example. This is the age pyramid of the world population, which, if we just look at the data here, this is as per 2021 population, more than 9% of the world's population is above 65 years of age. In numbers, these are 703 million persons. So this population, which we classify as old, which we classify as aged, which we classify as elderly, is a population that needs to be looked at, is a population that needs to be talked about, is a population that needs our attention, whether we are the society, whether we are the policymakers, whether we are the academia, they require our attention. And that is the entire purpose of this enterprise. Which brings me to the aspect of how do we make sense of aging? How do we try to theorize aging? How do we try to understand aging? My vantage point in doing that is through sociology. So the entire enterprise of the sociology of aging is by looking at the later years of life. They try to make sense of life towards the later part of life. But it is firmly grounded in the understanding that the aging of an individual is a lifelong process of growing up and growing older. Right? So to understand how old age is experienced, the sociologists realize that they have to look at the entire life course that preceded reaching old age. In a world where many children don't even see their 5th birthdays, we're talking about the aged population. So there are a number of barriers that they have crossed to reach that age. What is the impact of their life course on reaching that age is what we need to understand. Because that barrier crossing, that hurdle crossing, will also decide how they are living their old age. So the process of aging over the life course is affected by the biological factors, the psychological factors, the environmental factors, the economic factors, but the sociological perspective, it makes an important contribution to our understanding of aging by explicating how the social, the economic, the political, all these forces, how are they shaping the aging experience? For example, when we look at populations that have come out of wars, if we reflect, if we go back into into a historical analysis of the population that fought the world wars, the First World War or the Second World War, and reached old age, their experiences of life are very different from the populations that lived their prime in a non-war time period. So all of those factors are playing a very important role in the aging experience also. So aging, as I wish to submit, is socially constructed. This aspect is recognized to some extent, but not as much as it should be recognized. Now, when we say that aging is something which is socially constructed, what do we really mean by that? What is something that is socially constructed, right? Which brings me to the next aspect of when I say that aging is socially constructed, I am saying that the ways in which the individuals are aging, the manner in which they are aging, is something which is shaped by the existing social structures which they are encountering over their life course. So among the important social structures which influence how we age are our family systems, the state programs. Yes.
Sorry, but the slide is not moving.
Just 1 second. I'll reshare.
Yes. Thank you.
just let me know if you can see the sociology of aging slide.
No, it is sociological insight into the problem and challenges. It has stuck on the second number. Maybe you can just click the third number slide.
I'll just do that.
It's okay, no problem, then go ahead.
Okay. So, as I was saying, that when we say that aging is socially constructed, we're talking about what are the influences of the family, of the state, of the organizations, of education, of work, of religion, of healthcare on our life. Because those are the aspects that, very simply speaking, determine whether we get to age or not age. We will age if there are policies that allow us to live. We will be able to age if there are aspects within the state that allow us the freedom to live. Right? So all of those aspects are very important when we are trying to say that aging is something which is socially constructed. Now, what are the ways in which we can then, within the sociology of aging, look at how aging takes place? So there are two methods to doing this within sociology of aging. One aspect is to discover how these social forces shape aging. That is when we compare the aging experiences of different birth cohorts. A birth cohort, very simply speaking, consists of those who are born in a particular year who age together through time. So, for example, those born in 1970, 1970, those born in 1960, those born in 1950, those born in 1980, those born in 1990. We look at that particular group that has taken birth together, and then we do a comparison across different birth cohorts in terms of different components of the population. So, could be gender, could be social class, could be ethnicity, could be religion, could be race, could be various factors. Another way by which we can evaluate how context affects aging is a comparative research, which is across societies. So in this particular manner, what sociologists do is that they compare the aging aspect in societies, for example, India and Sri Lanka, India and Japan, India and China, India and the United States of America, could be any particular reference, to see how aging takes place in one particular society as compared to another society, where we look at what are the factors again which are influencing the aging process. So this is the work that sociologists do within their study of the sociology of aging. Which brings me to the perspectives which guide sociological insights into the study of aging. Now, I am aware that some of these perspectives have been discussed earlier on as well. My submission here is only to discuss three particular theoretical viewpoints, which are of more relevance to my engagement with you. So these are the disengagement theory, the activity theory, and the conflict theory. Now, I am trying to showcase this to you more through imagery than through text. So the disengagement theory essentially, presents the idea that societies have to find ways for older people's authority to give way to the younger people. So society has to essentially encourage the elderly to disengage from their previous roles, to take on roles which are more appropriate for their role, for their ages, for the aspect of how are they declining in their physical abilities, how are they already declining in their mental abilities. So to be able to take on those roles which are to be given up by the elderly to the younger groups. So in this way, what society does is that it affects a kind of smooth transition of its elderly into a more sedentary kind of lifestyle. And it ensures that the previous roles that are there are taken up by the younger generation. Now, this disengagement theory is something which essentially assumes that social aging preserves the society's stability. and that the society needs to ensure that this disengagement takes place. So within the sociological viewpoints, then it is placed firmly in the functionalist perspective, because the functionalists say whatever happens, happens because it is beneficial for the society. So the disengagement theory, which I have tried to depict through this image, is one in which the elderly are supposed to get disengaged from active life. They are supposed to renounce their positions of authority, their positions of superiority, and allow the younger ones to take their place, which can be understood also in the context of the Hindu idea of the ashrams, the Vanaprastha ashram, that you renounce the worldly pleasures, you give up on your life as a householder, and you devote the remaining portion of your life to spirituality, right? Because you have to go back into and join the spiritual realm. Now, the problem with this particular perspective, which I believe society does not engage often enough with, is that there is this assumption that one, the elderly are not capable of adequately performing their roles. Now, there are many societal functions that the elderly can perform better than the younger generation. But this is something which is completely discounted. This is something that is in one way taken away from them. They're not given a choice regarding disengagement. They are asked to disengage. They are instructed to give up. They are instructed to renounce. Now, many individuals, many elders cannot really afford to even disengage from their economic engagement. Their needs, their necessities are such that if they leave their jobs, they will not be able to survive. And also that if they leave their jobs, they will be losing out on the benefits, not only of the economic benefits of working, but also the social benefits of working, of engaging with the larger social. That is something that continues to be problematic as far as the disengagement theory is concerned. And also, if we try to look at the repercussions of this disengagement, even if I believe that I can be gainfully employed, I am told to withdraw, which leads to a kind of loss of self, which exactly is what is depicted in this particular image. The next theory that I want to talk about is the activity theory, and which is something that most sociologists who are working in the domain of aging try to refer to. Now, the activity theory is one which assumes that the elders, they benefit both themselves and the society if they remain active and if they try to continue to perform the roles that they had before they aged. Now, in this, in comparison to the first image, what you can see is that these two individuals are happy with what they're doing. Even if it is seen to be something which is childlike, it means that they're active, they're agile, they are moving around. They have this sense of freedom, they have this sense of devoting or doing something, which is something that's very important. So as the elderly, they continue to perform their roles, their perception of the situations that they are in is something which continues to be formulated. And this is a very important aspect to how they see aging. Because in the process of aging, if they lose their self-esteem, it becomes a problematic process. But if they're allowed to stay active, they can also perceive aging in a different manner. And this, because it talks a lot about the aspect of the focus being on the individual, falls within the interactionist perspective within the larger sociological schools of thought. Now, the problem with this particular perspective also is one that the appraisal of the ability of the elderly to maintain a particular level of activity can be seen to be very optimistic. Some elders, they do remain active, but not all of them can. Another criticism, which is also at many times leveled against the theory regarding activity, is that it is a very individualistic approach. It overlooks the barriers that societies can place to successful aging. Right now, again, in this particular context, when an elderly person, does not behave his or her age, there are questions that are asked about why is this person behaving like this. It doesn't suit his age, it doesn't suit her age. That is our conditioning, our social conditioning in the context of the aged talking. So this activity theory, also is criticized for this sweeping assumption that people will at one level allow the elderly to do what they were doing when they were younger, which is again a problematic assumption. Now, the third theory that is there is one that falls in the conflict perspective. So the conflict theory essentially says that, the emphasis within this theory is that there are older workers who are there and they are devalued because they are no longer economically productive, and they are also drawing higher salaries, and they are drawing health benefits. There are other costs which are driving down the profits of the capitalists. So this emphasizes a kind of inequality among the aged along gender, race, ethnicity, social class lines. Now, this particular perspective then also places the elderly in a conflict situation vis-a-vis the young. So the elderly, if they continue to be gainfully employed, are taking away jobs or not giving up jobs for the younger population, right? So the conflict perspective is one that looks at the conflict because of age between the elder and the young population. Now, when we reflect on the conflict, there are elders who are very wealthy. There are those who are very poor. Depends on their engagement with the larger economic domain. Now, one problem with the conflict perspective also is that it tends to blame ageism, that is, this discrimination that is there on the basis of age, on modern capitalist economies. Now, the truth is that the negative view of the elderly, they also exist in pre-capitalist industries, right? So, even if they are overall more positive than the modern capitalist economies, but still they did exist even in the pre-industrial societies. So we can't really blame then the industrial system of production for all problems that are there in the larger social, right? Now, the reason why I want you to reflect on these perspectives, whether it is disengagement or it is activity or it is conflict, is because I would want you to again reflect on the depiction that you have witnessed of the elderly in the mass media around yourself, in the literature that you read, in the advertisements that you see, in the movies that you've seen, in the web series that you would have seen, in all aspects of the popular culture that is all around us, of the mass media that is all around us. What is the kind of projection of the elderly that you see? What is the way in which you see the elderly being projected? Because that will essentially be a part of the depiction, either following the perspective of disengagement, right? That now it is your age, please give up all of this and let us handle it all, right? Or is it is an aspect of activity that, no matter what your age, you're still young to do whatever you want to do? Or is there an aspect of the generational conflict playing out, right? Now, all of these perspectives guide us, and the aspect that you need to work on at the end of all of this is which of the theories makes greater sense to you, and then ask yourself the question of why does this theory seem like it is the best explanation, right? Now, why we need to ask these questions again is that just like there is no singular way in which we can talk about aging, there is no singular categorization of aging also. There are multiple groups within the elderly group, or within that group that we label as aged. I had also shared the graph with you, the world population graph, in which, I told you that the population pyramid that you see categories of population from 60 to 64, 65 to 69, 70 to 74, 75 to 79, 80 to 84, 85 to 90, 90 to 94, 95 to 99, and those who've crossed the century, right? They've passed 100. Now, when we talk about this aspect of the aged also, there is a heterogeneity in the aged group, which we need to look at. Now, this is majorly true of developed countries of the world. Why do we say that? Because in the developing countries of the world, life expectancy is still low. In the developed countries of the world, life expectancy has risen. So in this, in the developed countries of the world, there are different parameters according to which the aged are divided. The young old, that is those between 60 to 69. The middle old, that is between 70 to 75. The old, that is individuals who are aged above 75, but under 80. And the very old, that is those who are 80 and above. Now, the WHO, it talks about old age as the period of life where impairment of mental and physical function becomes increasingly manifest by comparison with previous periods of life. So it is considered an assortment of diseases and disabilities which lead to dependency in later life. But the question that I come back to is this absolutely true? Can this general statement be made? Is it a right statement to make? Now, the questions again that I will come back to and take you through this particular portion is that can we successfully categorize people by chronological age? Is it just that? Is it just a number? Is it something more than that? And do they have nothing to contribute to the larger social? If they do, then how can they continue to live their life the way in which they want to live their life? How does society look at and treat these old people? Right? Like I told you that if you look at the depictions that are there, you will be able to answer the question of the elderly very well by yourself. And why should we always ensure compliance by members of society to act their age? And what happens when they don't? Is society tolerant of these individuals? Is it not tolerant of these individuals? What are the repercussions of not acting your age? Right? Now, in order to understand this, in order to deal with these questions, what is important is to then understand what are the problems or challenges that the aged experience, those that they feel. Now, this is a very simple bifurcation of problems or challenges of the aged. We can simply divide them into the physiological problems, the psychological problems, the social problems, the emotional problems, and the financial problems. Now, these are not in any particular order or sequencing. These are all equally important issues that they are experiencing. For some individuals, the financial problems become paramount, become more important than any other problems that they are experiencing. So the first is the physiological problems. Now, this essentially includes a general reduction of their physical and mental abilities. They feel less than well, usually. They have a difficulty in working. They feel fatigued. They have a greater need for rest, for sleep. There is this aspect of forgetfulness that also is added. There is a loss of confidence that they experience. The other health problems or physiological problems include illnesses due to cold, cough, fever, headache, body pain, dental problems that they face digestive complaints, the trembling of the limbs, the weakness in the eyesight, the impairment of hearing. Then there are major illnesses which are also there, which can include, but not necessarily are limited to, tuberculosis, paralysis, asthma, anemia, diabetes, blood pressure, cardiac troubles, and the non-adoption of any preventive measures. There is also this aspect of, assuming that now that I am aged, now that I am old, now that I'm past this particular age category, I will have these problems. So there is no real effort made to prevent any of these ailments also. The psychological problems include this, firstly, this acceptance of the traditional belief and cultural stereotype of the aged, that now that I am this age, this is all that life is. Then the physical changes which are taking place, which prove to be a barrier to communication, to social relationships. Then the realization that a mental decline has already started, because the brain is also a machine. It needs to be kept well functioning in order to help you towards your older age. Then the other aspect, the other psychological problem, is the constant feeling of guilt about their idleness, which is again societally contributed to. Then the aspect of reduction of income, this insecurity that comes as a result of reduction of income, also hampers their living, their psychological well-being. And the social disengagement, which is a major psychological hazard, because man, as Aristotle said, is a social animal. So you need to be socially engaged. And if you reflect for a minute, one of the theories of aging is the disengagement theory. But social disengagement is a serious psychological hazard for the elderly. The next is the social problem, which is one that is to do with the social losses that they feel. Because their social life is narrowed down, there is a loss of work, there is a death of a relative, friends, spouses. Weak health also contributes to restrictions being placed on their movement, on their social activities, on their social engagements. then the home essentially by default becomes the center of their social life, and it gets confined to their interpersonal relationship with their family members. If those relationships are also not good, they feel complete alienation. Now, the loss of most of their social roles that they were once performing is also something that leads to loneliness, leads to an isolation, leads to depression, which can have a social manifestation as well. Then there are emotional problems. So the decline in the mental ability makes the aged dependent. So they don't trust their own judgment, they don't trust their own ability, but they also want to tighten their grip over the younger ones. Upon reflection, when a child is trying to do something on her own self, they would try to stop the adult from helping them, saying that I can do it on my own. The same thing applies on the elderly. They are losing the ability to do those tasks, but they don't want that dependence on the other. They don't want to be seen as someone who cannot take care of themselves. So they want to get involved in all aspects, but the younger generation really doesn't look at them for guidance. So they are sidelined, which also leads to emotional problems. Now they start, they feel a sense of in deprivation from their own dignity, a deprivation from their sense of importance that they had as a contributing member in the society. Then there are definitely financial problems. So retirement from service is something which results in loss of income, and pensions that they receive are extremely inadequate to meet the cost of living because inflation is already high. Now, with the reduced income, that they are getting, they also know that their income has reduced, but their expenditure has increased. So the diagnosis, treatment of diseases, it causes greater financial problems for old age, right? Now, a very major issue, which is important is elder abuse, which, as was highlighted in the beginning, is the abuse of older people, also known as elder abuse, which is a single or a repeated act or a lack of appropriate action, which occurs within any relationship where there is an expectation of trust. Now, this action or inaction is something which causes harm or distress to an older person. Now, this type of abuse could include physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, financial and material abuse, abandonment, neglect, and serious loss of dignity and respect. And it is recognized as a violation of human rights. Now, elder abuse sadly is rampant. 1 in 6 people above 60 have experienced some form of abuse in the community over the last year. This is from the 2022 report, June report of the WHO. And the rate of abuse is also something which is high, even within institutions such as nursing homes, such as long-term care facilities, where they are supposed to provide care and rehabilitation to the elderly. Even there, it is high. According to statistics, 2 out of 3 workers in these institutions have reported that they did act, committed an act of abuse against an elderly who was in their care. And this abuse of these older people is something which can lead to serious physical injuries, can lead to long-term psychological consequences also, which is extremely problematic. The abuse of older persons is, predicted also to increase. Why are we saying that it will increase? Because populations are aging. Right now, we're probably talking about 9% of the world's population being aged. Another 20 years, there is an estimate that double this number will fall in the category of the aged. So obviously, as population of these people will increase, there is a greater tendency of abuse also to increase. Now, again, as was highlighted, today, which is the 15th of June, is marked as the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, the aim of which is to raise awareness about the atrocities and neglect of the elderly. Now, the abuse of the elderly is a very serious issue and is an issue that needs to be addressed. Whether it is financial, it is emotional, or it is physical abuse and neglect, it is an everyday issue for a significant part of the population to look at, to evaluate, right? And it is something that has to be met with. It is something that has to be countered. And there should be a lot of effort made to support and protect the elderly all through the year. And this is just a day which is meant to highlight their plight, to ensure that their plight is not ignored. We're not saying that this one day will create all the awareness and abuse will just vanish. No. But this is important because there is this awareness that has to be there. Now, why of this addressing of the abuse is important? Like I said, the number of persons aged 60 and above is projected to grow by 38% from a billion to a billion and a half, globally outnumbering the youth. And this increase, make mandates that there is a recognition that greater attention has to be paid to the specific challenges that the older persons are facing, including in the field of human rights, right? And it exists both in the developing countries and in the developed countries of the world. But typically it goes underreported. Very few instances are reported, but even those instances are enough for us to ring the bell and try to stop it. Now, like I said, that the extent of elder mistreatment is unknown, but the consequences and the significance is obvious. So that is the reason why we need to work together, which is why I appreciate this particular session, because it tries to define, detect, address elder abuse, and also that it has to be placed within a cultural context, and it has to be considered alongside culturally specific risk factors, right? We can again not have a one kind of policy that tries to address abuse across all kinds of societies. That is something that will not really serve the purpose. So in certain societies, for example, older widows are subjected to forced marriages. In others, they're isolated. They are accused of witchcraft. So we can't have one kind of policy. Unless both the primary healthcare and the social service sector are equipped to identify and deal with the problems, elder abuse sadly will continue to be underdiagnosed and overlooked. Now, in this particular manner, that is the reason why it's very important to look at the kind of legislations that are there to address abuse. For example, in the Indian context, we have a legislation that tries to put the onus of maintenance of the parents, maintenance of the elders of the family on the younger generation, which is something that is required. It is something which becomes a necessity if there is abuse, if there is violence, if there is a denial of human rights. Now, which brings me to the next aspect, that is, what is it that the aged really need? What do they want? What is it that they require? What are, and they're not like a collected group of people who can assert themselves together. It really doesn't work like that, sadly. But what is it that they want? What is it that they require? And their needs, their wants are very, very simple. Some of those are very basic human needs that are there. So the aged essentially need, and this is the result of a number of surveys that have been carried out by sociologists looking at aging as an issue. I won't call it a problem, but as an issue. So the results of those findings essentially highlight that financial security, being able to have control over their finances, is something that is a very gravely felt need of the elderly, that they should not be dependent for financial matters on someone else. And this is closely related to personal security, security in terms of space, security in terms of having a roof over their head, security in terms of not feeling the threat of being thrown out of their own houses by their own children, by their own family, that kind of personal security, security against physical abuse, security against verbal abuse, security against sexual abuse, security against psychological abuse, that kind of personal security, which also contributes to their mental health. If I have a roof over my head, if I know that my rights are being protected, I can sleep peacefully. I will feel rested. I will feel that I am, being taken care of, but not like a child, like an adult. So that mental health is also that they require. Then there is the aspect of healthcare, which is again a very important need of the elderly. Mental health essentially, means that whatever are the requirements for the elderly's mental well-being should be created for them. We know that there are these aspects of decline of the mental facilities that takes place with old age, which is partly a biological factor. So what is it that can be done to amplify their mental health, to help them, think better, to help them feel better about their mental health? And there are studies that show that, individuals who are engaged, for example, in social activities, individuals who are engaged in literary activities, for example, those who do a lot of mental games, in the context of word games, in the context of number games, for example, things like Sudoku, crosswords, Scrabble, they are able to exercise their mental faculties better, and they have better mental health, which compares to the neurological aspect of the brain, which is again something which is a need of the elderly. Then there is this aspect of self-actualization. Now, for those who know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is right at the top of Maslow's need hierarchy. And this essentially is the need that allows you to be yourself, that gives you a sense of worth, which comes from within, not necessarily from outside, but what is outside is reflected on you as well. So this self-actualization need also comes across very strongly in most studies. Then there is a need for community engagement, which the elderly feel. This can be in the form of volunteering, participating in social activities, right? Then this whole idea of freedom, which can be understood as non-dependence, which can be understood as a freedom to make their own decisions, which is important. Now, to bring it back to what I started with, that was, how is the media presenting the aged to you, right? And the problem is that the media regularly perpetuates the stereotypes of older adults through inaccurate and demeaning portrayals of older adults in print, in advertising, in entertainment. There's very limited effort which is made to alter how older adults are depicted in the media. So when you have the depiction of the elderly in popular culture, in the media, which is in films and television series and web series, you will have them projected in a very stereotypical manner, as irritable, as grouchy, as slumpy, as complaining, as people who just ask questions about what the youth are doing with their time, right? People who will relegate stories about their own youth, right? And also the aspect of how there is a kind of amplification of their bodily discomforts, of their problems, which is something that they would spend a lot of time talking about as compared to anything else. The media rarely portrays the older population as gainfully engaged, as contributing, as doing what they want to do, as taking decisions, as independent. But this is something that I generally try to end my sessions on happy notes. So this is something that has been witnessed, that with social media, with certain kinds of social media aspects, there are some positive changes which are also emerging. Now, for this, I just taken 3 examples from popular social media. So the question here is that an individual is senile at 90 or an individual is active at 90. So in a lot of social media, circles, we have the example of Harbhajan, a 90-year-old entrepreneur who started her own Besan Barfi enterprise in Chandigarh, right? That the first 2,000 rupees that she earned at the age of 90 was the first money that she ever earned on her own account. And she was thrilled beyond belief by that particular exercise. And through support of the family, but through her own agency, she was able to sustain a business by which she is selling a number of things, all handmade, all of which she does on her own account, right? So this is something which says that, our tendency to categorize, our tendency to write them off is something which is problematic. So this is one example. This is a 90-year-old woman doing her own thing at that age. Then there is another example which questions this whole aspect of, are only the young who are agile? The old cannot be agile, they cannot be flexible, they cannot be active. This also is an internet sensation, putting short reels of her dancing on Instagram, the first of which was put by her grandson. She is 63-year-old. She is Ravi Bala Sharma, who is dancing away to glory, right? And she is just, I've only taken examples from people, who are part of the normal population. We have examples, in the Indian context of someone like Hema Malini, who dances most beautifully at the age of 73, right? So easily, the dancing Dadi has 10 more years to dance away to glory in her, with herself. Now, I could not just take only examples of women. This is another example that I've taken. This is a supermodel who started modeling only at the age of 60. This is Dinesh Mohan. He's a widely known model who tells us that, there is no real limit or no real barrier that exists to doing what you want to do. That barrier is self-created. It is also socially constructed, because I am a reflection of that which is outside of me, just like that which is outside is reflected inside of me, right? So all of this is something which in one manner is meant for you to question aging, question old age, question categorizations, and also try to make sense of the problems. And what we have, in the examples that I've tried to share here are examples of engagement, are examples of independence, are examples of ability, and not looking at age as a deterrent to doing something. So I know that I have to end at 7:30, so I'm just ending that. As per Ingmar Bergman, old age is like climbing a mountain. You climb from ledge to ledge. The higher you get, the more tired and breathless you become, but your views become more extensive. And that is what aging was seen to be in a lot many traditional societies. That is why we had age set societies in the past. So these are the references that I had used for my work. And with that, I will just end.
So thank you so much. And I really congratulate. It was one of the best sessions, I would say. And your session is a kind of sociological summary of all our sessions. You really, it was really deep presentation. And when we think about old age people, and when we think about old age issues for that matter, two things are very important. One is personal fear, means how we can combat personal fear and how we can combat social stigma. And really, it was very beautiful. And the last section is very optimistic and very, inspirational also. And in that spirit, I can recall my favorite English poet, Maya Angelou, and she wrote something on aging, which I want to recite here. When you see me sitting quietly, like a sack left on the shelf, don't think I need your chattering. I am listening to myself. I am the same person I was back then, a little less hair, a little less chin, a lot less lungs, and much less wind. But aren't I lucky? I can still breathe here. So with this word, now I would like to invite one of the seekers of this summer school and very deep thinker, Dr. Parneet Jaggi. She is Associate Professor of English of Ambedkar University in Rajasthan. So, Dr. Parneet Jaggi, you are cordially invited to share some thoughts.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you so much. And I'm greatly honored, privileged, and so elated to be a part of this summer school. And I'm so happy that the presentations were so productive, so evocative, so fruitful, that they had loads of information, loads of motivation for all of us as participants. I'm glad I joined this summer workshop, and I applaud Dr. Randhir Gautam for his incentives, for his initiatives in carrying on these tasks so smoothly and gracefully. Randhirji, I liked your poem. I liked the lecture today. It was so smoothly carried on with elite grace, and I am all appreciation for Madam. And I am so thankful for these practices that you've taken up, because these practices are really, really needed in our society. We have to look after our older generation. We are responsible for their care because they have brought us up and they have made us what we are today. So it becomes our core duty to look after the society and set an example for the coming young generation of our kids, of our children, our teenagers, our youth, who are growing up in an age of technology where emotions and relations have no place actually. So I'm all appreciation for this workshop, which actually not only updates us on informative ideas, but also instills a kind of a value system in all of us, that we have to be aware of the problems and challenges of old age, because we all are proceeding towards it. So congratulations, Dr. Gautam, and the entire organization. I'm so thankful. I'm so happy to be a part of it. Thank you, Randhirji.
Thank you, Dr. Pranit Chegi, as always. Very, very deep with her articulation of anything. So, dear and respected friend, if you have any question or query, you can ask. So, may I invite Minty ji to ask some question, and then Professor Gyan Gului, and then
Hello,
yes,
am I audible?
yes,
Yeah.
you are.
Good evening, everyone. I thank Dr. Sanjana Salma for her very beautiful presentation. As you said, it is a summary of all these classes. So, to this presentation, I would like to add two more points. You know, in one article I just read, in India, it is 60 year is considered as the age of retirement. But the research found actually is the 65 is the age which is more productive, because all the Nobel laureates and they all win the Nobel prizes and they have their best discoveries and the things on the age of 65. Of course, there are many theories contributed to that. Why they are able to do that? Because they're that time free of all the responsibilities, and they totally concentrated on their work and other things. And the second point is, ma'am was telling ageism. So that is in this COVID actually showed how things can go worse. Like everybody was too concerned, concerned only about the youth. People were the middle aged and the little bit 40s 50s, they were jobless in fact. Like thinking everywhere you go they said we are taking the young people. So I don't know whether it is to be done through the government policies or through the private policies. So people should consider the productivity of the people, not the age. In But towards the end, mom actually said very nice thing. Slowly the scenario is changing, and the one or two three, I mean, you can count the examples whom people can take the inspiration. If they can do, we also can do. Or no, that is a positive change of our society. So I thank you so much. It was very beautiful one, and thank you for
Thank
giving me
you.
this
Thank
opportunity.
you,
Thank
Minty.
you.
And I request Dr. Sanjana ji to kindly note down these questions and concerns and please answer at the end of the session. May I invite Professor Gyan Gului to kindly share his thought and insights on this presentation.
thank you very much. Well, it was really very, very interesting, and I noted very many things. I am now reflecting on them, and well, I would perhaps ask a question about a point which particularly impressed me, because I did not know anything of the theory, that is the disengagement theory. Well, I was meditating on the implications of the disengagement theory, provided that I have understood it correctly, because I think that I see it as a possible source of conflicts between people. That is, if it is meant that society should convince people should convince all the people to disengage themselves from the actual work, from the activities of the life. Well, I think I see this as a kind of so to speak, intervention from above, a deep intervention from above, a strong intervention from above in the life of the person, of the individual. And well, I think that there could be, I do not know, as said, whether I have understood correctly the theory, but I see this as the source of possible conflicts between the individual, which is aging, but probably is not so much willing to leave the work, the activity. A conflict between the individual and the society itself. That is, there is, in my opinion, in this theory, the great risk that there is a conflict, a strong conflict between the individual and is a perception of the society as something which is imposing him something which at the end of the day he or she would not like to do. That is, I wish to inform myself better about the theory, because I see it as a possible really source of conflict between individual and country, individual and state, individual and government, individual and public authority. This would be my question. Thank you very much. It was really wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gyanagulri. We are also joined by Jairam Sisadri Sahab. Sir, would you like to ask any question? Mansi Soni?
No, I'm fine. Thank you, Randir, sir. Thank you. I'm listening, and thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm learned a lot from the little time that I was here, and I very much appreciate all your programs and talks. And I just want to be a fly on the wall in this discussion, and I will learn more. Thank you, Mr. Lord.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sanjana ji. Now over to you.
Okay, so to answer the question that was asked by Miniti ji, now it was not exactly a question. Her idea was more to put on this aspect of the COVID situation also, and it is very rightly she's highlighted that during the COVID also there was a lot of emphasis that was placed on the population that was already working and how they were out of jobs, but there was not enough that was done for the elderly. Even the instances of abuse against the elderly went up a lot during the COVID and the COVID mandated lockdown as resource crunch was being felt. The will to spend more on the elderly was something that was missing already. So that complicated their lives further. And like Miniti ji highlighted, the idea of retirement age, which is said to be 60, is something which is which depends. In the corporate sector, there is a different rule by which the corporate world plays, whether it is 60 or there are extensions that are given. In the governmental enterprises also, those who attain the age of retirement, whatever are the extensions that the state wishes to grant them, those extensions are granted. But it is true that there are many of the major contributions to knowledge, contributions to science, contributions to technology are taking place after the individual has attained the age of 16. So like I said, it is very problematic to chronologically determine that one person is contributing or not contributing depending on the age. So up till 59 years and 364 days, I am a contributing member of society. That moment that day ends and I become 60, I'm supposed to be retired. So there is no way in which I am lesser of an individual with the change of one date. It is more to do with the aspect of maintaining order in the larger social. That if I need people to be inducted into a service at a particular age, I need to create more jobs for them. And one way of creating that job is to letting go of the old employees, who are also, like I said, as per the conflict theory, seen to be a burden on the industrial enterprise. So those were my submissions to her. And when it comes to the question asked by Sir, the idea, sir, of the disenchantment theory is that because it is coming out of the functionalist perspective within sociology, it assumes that the society will impress upon the elderly to give up their roles, responsibilities, positions of prominence, influence, affluence, and allow the younger ones to take their place. It is definitely a problematic submission, but if you look at the way in which norms are meant to dictate lives, for example, if we go back to the Durkheimian thought that is seen to be the fountainhead of functionalism in many ways, we look at the whole aspect of solidarity of the larger social. And the greatest strength of the collective conscience is when there is a homogeneity, is when there is a norm which all are following. And that norm is that you will work up to a certain age, and once you attain that age, you will stop doing that active life, and you will kind of give your position, give your throne, give your chair, give your desk, give your status, whatever, to the younger ones, right? And like I said, when I was also making my submission about the disengagement theory, it assumes that societies are finding a way by which the older population will give way to the younger population. It assumes that the society is encouraging the elderly to disengage from their previous roles. Like I said, in the Hindu context also, when we talk about Hindu philosophy, there are these aspects of the ashrams of life where you are supposed to lead the life of a student, where you are supposed to lead the life of a householder, where you're supposed to lead the life of a someone who is living in a detached attachment, and then someone who finally renounces the world and gives up on worldly pleasures and takes the path of spirituality, right? So there is a lot of assumption that is there in the theory. And obviously, if we look at the criticism of the theory, the major criticism is that there is an assumption that they are, one, no longer capable of doing what they are doing, and two, that they would want to give up their positions of importance or of influence and hand it over to the younger generation, which is definitely a problematic thing to assume. That is one of the major problems with the perspective. And that is a problem with, at one level, with the functional perspective at large, that it has these assumptions that it makes about the society because it wants to maintain the status quo, because it does not want to alter the larger social. It doesn't want a grand social change to take place. It wants things to continue as they were. So that is the issue with the disengagement theory. And much like, for example, when you have a corporate honcho who has held the realms of the enterprise for so long, it's not easy for him or her to let go of that position and allow someone else to take his place or her place. Similarly, in the situation of the household, where you have, for example, a matriarch or a patriarch who takes the decisions, it's not easy for them to let go of this authority, to let go and be happy with being relegated to the background. It is a problematic assumption, and that is one of the criticisms of the disengagement theory. But the way in which it tries to explain the aging process is that there are social norms which govern what should be done at what time. So when you are young, you are supposed to engage in these activities. When you are, an adolescent, you're supposed to do these activities. When you are a householder, you're supposed to do these activities. And once you've done whatever are your worldly responsibilities, you're supposed to renounce, step back, and focus on your spiritual growth. Right? That is the way in which it makes these assumptions about the way in which the society functions and the way in which aging process also takes place. I think I have answered the questions.
Yes. Thank you so much. It was a excellent, I would say, an excellent presentation, and particularly excellent, I would say, the response. And your presentation actually invites us to also think about the sociological theory engagement with different issue, particularly old age issue. And it will really enrich our theory building for that matter. So thank you so much. It was indeed very great presentation. And on behalf of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, we are so much blessed that you finally presented, and it was really indeed very insightful session. So thank you so much. And all our participants, Professor Gyan Guloi, Dr. Panit Jaggi, Jairam Sahab, and all other friends, thank you so much for your kind participation also. So tomorrow we will have presentation by Professor Athena and Anantagiri. So Athena will be talking about old age, the representation of old age people through social media, and she is a professor of media studies. She taught in Texas University also. So we look forward for your kind participation tomorrow also. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Salma ji. Thank you.